Good morning, everyone, and happy Easter. It's just right around the corner now. In honor of Easter, we're going to do something a little different today. Hopefully you'll enjoy it. First, I want to take you back to the English countryside over 200 years ago. There was a poet that was visiting a river, the banks of the river in the country, and his name was William Wordsworth. You may have heard of him, a very famous English poet. Now, he was so inspired by the natural beauty of the area that he composed a poem about it called Lines Composed a Few Miles Above the Tintern Abbey. Very descriptive title. I'm not going to read the poem, but I'll link to it if you want to check it out. But I am going to tell you what he wrote about his experience there when he was in that place and the effect that the landscape had on him. He wrote, "And I have felt a presence that disturbs me with joy of elevated thoughts, a sense of sublime something far more deeply interfused, whose dwelling is the light of setting suns in the round ocean and the living air and the blue sky and the mind of man. A motion and a spirit that implies all thinking things, all objects of thought, and rolls through all things." Now, Wordsworth was a poet, so he was rather inclined to, poets tend to feel things really deeply and write enthusiastically about them. But I think this is something, those words of his is something we can all relate to. And in terms of how he was feeling in that beautiful landscape. And today, some scientists wonder if maybe Wordsworth and the other romantics of the time, the other poets, maybe they were onto something in their passion for nature or love or life. And I bring these words of Wordsworth to you because today we're going to be talking about awe and things that inspire us with awe. It's AWE. And I mean, I think that really Wordsworth comments, their writings really capture that feeling of awe, a presence that disturbs me with joy. Like what great words, because there is something about awe that's almost overwhelming, right? It's just sort of takes you out of your body. A sense of sublime, of something far more. Stop there. And he talks about setting suns in the ocean and just the living air and blue sky and life. Emotion and a spirit that impels us, that drives us. So what is awe? What was it that the poet was describing there? We use the term awesome all the time, right? In a pretty casual manner, meaning cool, great, or yeah, I'm on board. Even just sometimes as a way to sign off in a text, right? Awesome. Sort of an all-purpose word these days. But if you pick the word apart, awesome, it really means something way deeper. It represents something that is worthy of awe, and awe is a pretty deep and big feeling. The Oxford Dictionary defines it as a feeling of reverential respect mixed with fear or wonder. And I think the key words here are reverential and wonder. And I want you to try to think of a time that you felt that sense of awe. And many people feel awe when they're looking up at the stars at night, because it stretches our mind almost more than we're able to comprehend, right? In the infinite aspect of the universe, like our minds cannot grasp that. So it creates such wonder, and it makes us feel really small, right? So what are some other things that might inspire awe? So night sky, nature in general, a beautiful landscape that might inspire a poet. Art can inspire awe, music. And certainly God can inspire awe in us too as well, right? And as this is Easter, let's first think about awe in the context of the Easter story. So I'm going to read to you from Matthew chapters 28, verses 1 through 10. After the Sabbath, at dawn on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary came to look at the tomb. Look, there was a great earthquake, for an angel from the Lord came down from heaven. Coming to the stone, he rolled it away and sat on it. Now his face was glowing like lightning, and his clothes as white as snow. The guards were so terrified of him that they shook with fear and became like dead men. But the angel said to the women, "Don't be afraid. I know that you are looking for Jesus who was crucified. He isn't here because he's been raised from the dead, just as he said. Come, see the place where they laid him. Now hurry, go and tell his disciples he's been raised from the dead. He's going on ahead of you to Galilee. You will see him here. I have given this message to you." With great fear and excitement, they hurried away from the tomb and ran to tell his disciples. But Jesus met them and greeted them. They came and grabbed his feet and worshiped him. Jesus said to them, "Don't be afraid. Go and tell my brothers that I am going into Galilee. They will see me there." So can you imagine what Mary and Mary must have been feeling like then when Jesus, who had died, rose up and spoke to them? And it's a pretty safe bet to think they were feeling awe. If we think that back to that definition, reverence, most definitely. I'm sure they're feeling very reverential. And wonder and amazement, for sure. And that definition even sort of refers to, and find it there, to fear, a feeling of reverential respect mixed with fear or wonder. So sometimes, because like even when you're looking up at the night sky, right, the unknown of it can even make you a little uncomfortable. And Wordsworth's words reflect that too, when he says, "A presence that disturbs me with joy." Like, I just think that disturbs me with joy. I think that really captures awe and what Mary and Mary must have been feeling when suddenly there was Jesus resurrected. So awe is very mysterious. And when we encounter vast mysteries that we can't understand with our current knowledge, we have to sort of rearrange our knowledge just to make sense of what we've encountered. So that's why it can be sort of have that fearful or discomfort, that disconcerting aspect, or to gaze up at the stars at night. And other times we feel awe. So, as I mentioned, there's many sources that can inspire awe. So art, music, and nature is often a very common source of awe for many people, and certainly is for me, as you know by now, and I know for many of you as well. Sometimes when I'm out backpacking or hiking, I just get lost in my thoughts and I'm just thinking about work from the day or whatever. But then I'll come over the rise of a hill or around a corner or the clouds, like on my skiing trip in Baxter a few weeks ago. It was dusk and there was a full moon, but it was cloudy, so we couldn't see it. But it was dusk, the sun had set, and I was skiing around in the pond, and it was beautiful. And then the clouds parted. It's like an expression, right? But literally the clouds parted, and the full moon rose and shone down on the pond I was skiing on, and it was just amazing. And it's, those sorts of, I could tell you about so many more of those situations that I've had when it's turning around in a canoe when there's the Traveler Mountain in Baxter State Park lit up with the alpenglow. It was just literally like it was glowing. It was an amazing evening. And so many situations like that where I'm taken out of my head and, I'm worried about all this stuff. And then all of a sudden, like, I'm absorbed by what's around me. And because I'm just so captivated by it. And it sort of takes me out of myself. And I think this is definitely the feeling of awe in its truest form. It almost takes you out of reality in a way, when you no longer can make sense of reality, which is sort of a theme of awe, that's mysterious. And it throws us from our understanding of the world and may help us require new understandings. So scientists have actually, as I mentioned in the beginning, have actually studied this feeling of awe. And there's a lot of data that suggests that awe is in fact basic to humanity and the human species. There's a lot of data on what awe does to us in our social interactions and our social behaviors and how we see ourselves. And it turns out it's a pretty deep and universal as well, human emotion. it can really act to connect individuals to the collective and to others around us. So time and time again, when people experience awe, they say things like, I felt small. I felt like it was part of something larger than myself. And right, and think of going back to that example of the stars again. I mean, doesn't it make you feel tiny thinking about this giant universe? And in terms of thinking about being a part of something larger than yourself, I really experience that those times when I'm out in nature and have those amazing experiences. And I feel both that I feel both small because everything around me is just so vast and amazing and wondrous. But at the same time, I feel sort of a part of it all in a way that I don't usually when I experience those times of awe. Now, the self and the ego, as Freud would put it, takes up a lot of space in our brain and our consciousness in terms of how we think. And we're always thinking, especially in this modern world, about my goals, my status, my aspiration, my day, what I'm doing, what I want, my interests, right? We're very focused on ourselves, and that's part of being human. So how do we ever manage to orient ourselves to those people, other people around us, and to society and the collective that is beyond our inner selves? Well, awe can do this by creating what psychologist Datcher Keltner calls the small self. And it was in part his book, by the way, that inspired this lesson. He wrote a book about awe and was on the Hidden Brain podcast. That's where this lesson came from. So Datcher Keltner, and came up with this word, small self. And in a lot of writings about awe and in religious writings from a long time ago, and nature writings, talks about the small self too. Ralph Waldo Emerson, he had this big epiphany that he says, I am nothing. And that was his sort of experience of awe and this larger connection to the world, how small he felt, small self. So once again, think about that feeling you have when you're looking up at the universe and it makes you feel small and yet connected. Now, this psychologist, Keltner, and a collaborator of his went to Yosemite National Park to do a study on how awe can affect people. So what they did is they stopped travelers at a particular outlook that was on a road, and it's the spot where you first get to see Yosemite Valley and El Capitan and the great granite slabs and incredible valley. And it's just an awe-inspiring spot. So when people got there, they'd look around, and then Keltner and his fellow researcher had people at that moment draw themselves and write me somewhere in the drawing. Now, at that overlook in this awe-inspiring location, in that context, those drawings were really small. The drawings of themselves, and when they wrote me, it was really small. So they had, in other situations, they had people draw the same thing in other circumstances that were not at a beautiful overlook, just sitting around in a lab probably. And the people who were drawing themselves at the awe-inspiring location in Yosemite drew themselves way smaller than people who just drew themselves in other circumstances, which is fascinating to me. So there's this thing called the vagus nerve. This is the largest bundle of nerves in your body. And it's very important. It can slow the heart rate, deepen breathing. It helps regulate digestion. It even helps with your gut and your microbiome, if you can believe it. This bunch of nerves. Now, in general, people who have a very well-functioning vagus nerve that is responsive and has elevated levels do better in life. And two scientists named Amy Gordon and Jenny Stellar found that little brief experiences of awe, seeing an inspiring image or hearing about even like moral beauty, good deeds, like that's another type of, that can be inspiring. That can be another thing that can cause awe, right? Is people's good acts and how people behave. So, which you could call moral beauty. All of this, it elevates your vagus nerve activation. And when your vagus nerve is more activated, it helps with all these other things like breathing and digestion and your gut. And feeling good. And just as impressively, the feeling of awe and of all those positive emotions, it can also quiet down the body's inflammation response. So like if your body is inflamed because of sickness or disease, feelings of awe can help reduce that. So that's pretty cool. Of course, these days, our lives kind of work against us having opportunities to feel awe. Our lives are so structured, we're so busy, and we just don't have opportunity to just sort of wander and allow those opportunities for awe to arise. And also with our technology these days, all our technology is so focused on the self, right? I mean, I guess you could say social media is about connecting with people, but it's still more about putting yourself out there, a certain version of yourself, and saying me, right? It's really not about the collective. And that self is sort of contrary to the feeling of awe, as we talked about earlier. So one of the easiest ways to find awe in an unbound way is just to go out, go for a walk, and give the space for the opportunity for awe. We've been doing this as humans for a long time, just going and wandering, or sitting and meditating. And in spiritual contemplative traditions, getting out into nature and going for walks and just being quiet and just letting your mind settle and allowing that space for awe to happen. These are all part of our traditions as human beings. So it's important to remember to give ourselves the time and the space to do that every once in a while in whatever way works for us. So that's all for today. Bit of a long one, but it was a wonderful topic, the topic of awe. And I hope you have an awesome Easter. So see you next time.